Bizarre Reality Media. The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones. What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep conversational exploration into the fringes of social norms. I'm the one they call Shane, aka the original Shane Squatch, and today for you guys, I'm excited to welcome Craig McNeill, also known as FTFE, the science communicator who's made a career out of challenging flat earth theories. From his days as a nuclear engineer to becoming a YouTube sensation, Craig has seen it all. Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the universe, debunk myths, and explore the fascinating world of science and skepticism. Buckle up for something a little bit different. But before we get into this fascinating conversation, just two quick news and updates for anybody that may not have caught it on the last couple of episodes. The Patreon is now just a one single tier, and it is $2.50 a month, and you'll get full access over there. If you guys are interested in possibly checking it out, there is a 7-day free trial available, and if you guys like it, hopefully you guys will stick around, of course. And if anybody wants to catch the next live episode of Bizarre Inquiries, that'll be happening on March 5th at about 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the usual place, the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube channel. And if anybody has any questions, clips, or articles they would like to submit for that, just make sure you get it to us before then. But if not, we will, of course, pass it along to the next episode. And if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their own bizarre experience or encounter, or contacting me for any other reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys could also email me through bizarrerealitymedia@outlook.com. Or you guys could also call or text the Bizarre Reality Media hotline 24/7, and that number is 313-364-1551. If you guys happen to miss that, it is available down in the show notes. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, Craig, aka FTFE, science communicator. How's it going today, man?
Doing well. Yeah, like I said, living the dream, surviving the horrors. It's one of the two. I can never really tell these days, right?
Matter of perspective, right? That's how most situations are. So, I mean, one person's hell could be another person's heaven, I guess. It depends on who you ask. So,
as long as I manage to wake up in the morning and then go to bed at night, I feel like I've done a good day.
Hey, I mean, as long as you're grateful, I guess, for each possible moment, that's all that really matters. I mean, life's one of those things that it always goes in rhythm, that you're always going to have the down patches, you're always going to have the up patches, but if you're alive, you won't have or if you're not alive, you won't have the opportunity to not be able to have those patches. So, if you're in a bad swing now, just give it enough time and it'll swing back the other way. So
swings and roundabouts.
Yep, exactly. So as far as today goes, man, we actually ended up getting connected through our Shane, aka Snake Turban Head. There you go. I want to make sure I said it correctly. And he's one of those people that is always extremely unfiltered. So I always really, really look forward to some of the conversations that I have as far as guests that he passes along my way. And we, of course, had a little bit of a back and forth talking about what you get into. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do exactly, why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Okay, so I'm an ex-military nuclear engineer with a degree in physics and a degree in nuclear engineering, and I've somehow fallen into the life of being a YouTuber, where I spend most of my time arguing with people that well, let's say aren't even as smart as toe fungus, the flat earthers, moon landing deniers, those kind of people. And I use it as an opportunity to try and teach real physics to people whilst arguing with people that don't understand how to cross the road without, a crash helmet and possibly dig their eye out in the morning with a spoon instead of eating their breakfast properly. So you can find me on YouTube, FTFE, or on TikTok now apparently, or on X or Facebook, or just search FTFE and I'll pop up.
So where did it all start for you exactly? I know everybody kind of has those moments where they really kind of sparks them into being pushed into some of these positions where they feel the need to be able to argue their opinion or make sure that they clarify an opinion. So where did this all start for you?
Well, I was discharged from the Navy after I got injured, and I carried on working for as long as I could after that, but my injuries got too bad and I couldn't. And I spent a couple of years unemployed, being disabled, and extremely depressed about it. And I fell across flat earthers on Facebook. They were infesting Facebook at the time. And I was like, is this a joke? Is there actually really people that think the earth is flat? Started talking to them, realized that they were real, then met one in real life that was a bit of a douchebag. And then I kept showing my wife, Emma, look at this idiot flat earther. Look what this person's saying. And she was like, look, I don't care. Stop showing me. You've got 2 degrees. Why don't you make a YouTube channel debunking them? So I did. And then within a month, I'd had a few million views, and it really kicked off. And within like 6 months, I realized that, wait, I don't need to be disabled and on benefits and work for anybody else. I could maybe turn this into something that works. So I just worked really hard and pushed the channel, kept finding flat earthers to debate, making videos, and somehow it's turned into a full-time job that manages to support me and my family.
Man, the flat earth thing, man, I feel like that was a huge wave a couple years ago where there were so many people that were on board with it. They'd sit here on the internet arguing with people constantly about it. It was one of those topics that I ended up having one person on that was a flat earther, and you couldn't really like have a conversation with them. No, I'm always open to having a conversation, but it's impossible to do it with a lot of these flat earthers. So it's been a topic that it's like, I don't even want to touch because it's not even worth arguing with these people, that it's like arguing with a wall. But
walls are more intelligent. Don't be mean to, why have you said that? Walls never asked for that. They're way smarter. I've had over 1,500 flat earth debates on my channel and on other channels, and they always go the same way. I would start to explain something. A flat earther has short attention span or impulse control issues, will start shouting over me. So then I just decide to go FTFE and do it back. And conversations with them are very hard because they just don't really understand how adults have conversations. They're not smart enough to understand that they're being dumbasses and douchebags.
Dude, that's one of those conspiracies, though. I feel like it was one of those ones that was thrown out at the perfect time, that it seemed like it was intended to be one of those huge diversion tactics, because it was like COVID started kicking off, everybody started really spatting their opinions and trying to actually get the truth out there. And then right when that started, of course, people have to have something else to talk about besides just COVID. Yeah. So all of a sudden, this flat earth concept pops up. And it's one of the, I feel like, most dividing concepts in all of like the conspiracy community. It's like that and Tartaria are the ones that, either you're fully on board or you fully think it's a psyop, but you can't convince people either way on both sides of it. So it's like you said, it's one of like the hardest debates to have with somebody because, I want to hear your opinion. I want to understand why you believe what you believe. But at the same time, though, a lot of the time these guys, they have like one guy who's like a key guy and they regurgitate that information from that guy and it all gets trickled down.
We call them the pupperflurfs or the flatties.
So it's like one person with the information and the rest are just spatting back information.
And that's the thing. When in the debates, I very quickly realized that either they're a complete poem pretending to be a flat earther, or if they're a real flat earther, it becomes very obvious who their pupperflurf is very quickly by the things they're saying. They either spout Eric Dubé's 200 proofs, or the lies that Dave Weiss says, or Nathan Oakley, Earth is measured flat. They just repeat the things that they've heard their favorite flat earthers say. And it's ironic because they always go on about thinking for yourselves. Oh, you guys just use NASA and what school told you. Think for yourselves. But not one of them has the ability to think for themselves.
Say it's either that or you get the other flip side where people are coming from a biblical perspective and then it's always like the talk about the firmament. So that's, again, one of the hard debates to have because, again, how do you tell somebody to pull away from the biblical context when they're a diehard Christian? It's almost impossible to have that conversation again.
Yeah, that's why I like to go to some of my other friends that are also globe earthers and argue with them that are Christians, because there's nowhere in the Bible that it actually says the earth is flat. And the Bible was never written as a literal interpretation of things. It's all allegories and poems, basically. But the problem is you get these biblical flat earthers that will take words like the firmament and God's footstool and things like that, like, literally, without understanding the context behind it and the fact that they were written by sheep herders, 5 to 2,000 years ago that lived in the Middle East and had no concept of the shape of the earth. How could the book describe a flat earth when the people that had never been anywhere outside of their 200 square miles or something,
I mean, as far as they knew, their perspective was completely flat because, I mean, they were just looking in one straight direction and making assessments from there. I mean, it's, again, one of those hard conversations to have with people because, again, they got to view the context that when it comes to especially these older references, perspective and the people and their understanding of things at the time is something you definitely have to take into consideration because I mean, even some of the UFO community and some of like the weirder topics that kind of get into the biblical stuff, it's like you have to kind of take into consideration that people had different names and different explanations for things depending on their viewpoint and their understanding of things at the time. And even going into like the biblical context of things, you get into this whole idea of knowledge. And one of the debates that I always talk about with that is that I think that all knowledge is intended to be given, but at a certain time, kind of like the fact that you wouldn't just give a child all knowledge all at once. So if you're looking at the Bible in that context, maybe people didn't need this bigger understanding of the earth back then because it was too much for them. But now it doesn't mean that, things can't necessarily change with more knowledge or more opinion because, like you said, it never states clearly that the earth is flat. It never says that specifically. So, again, more knowledge, more understanding, you got to be able to change your frame of reference on some of these things.
Yeah, and then when you get down into the Bible, there's so many different translations and mistranslations and retranslations and rewritings. You could go to the Dowie hymns Bible that literally mentions the earth being a sphere, but then you look at the King James Bible and it kind of mentions about the firmament and the dome and things like that. And, it's different interpretations written by different people. And if you really want to understand the Bible, you have to go back to the original text. And, no one really understands that.
I mean, even going farther back than that, at a certain point, I feel like you almost have to look into like Zoroastrianism. Yeah. So also kind of getting into this conversation before we piss too many people off, I'm sure that I probably have some listeners, of course, that at least kind of adhere to this as a possibility, but maybe are kind of sitting on the fence. So for anybody that may be like sitting on the fence because the people that, are too far off, there's probably no saving them anyways. I'd like you to take a moment to kind of take some of the biggest arguments that some of the flat earthers use and kind of throw your context in on them and why they don't make any sense so that, again, maybe you can push somebody over the fence onto the good side if they're sitting there right at the moment.
Okay, so the main argument you always hear flat earthers go back to is water is flat, which is actually ridiculous because water isn't ever flat. The sea isn't flat. There's a horizon for a reason because this, it's curved, and that's when the earth and the water literally get in the way. But they stick to this concept of the water is flat, the water is level, which is just repeating what Eric Dubay said, without understanding what level really means. Level on Earth is an equipotential thing caused by gravity. Everywhere on Earth, gravity is pulling towards the center. So everywhere on Earth is level relative to the pull of gravity. So the water around Earth is being pulled down to gravity. But when you look at, say, a swimming pool, it looks flat because it's so small compared to the size of the Earth. But you can actually, if you've got tools that are accurate enough, you can measure even like an Olympic swimming pool and find out that it's not. I like to mention their tow tanks, the hydrodynamic test facilities, where they're massive tanks, like a couple of kilometers long of water, and you bring boats in on them to test their hydrodynamic abilities, and they have rails that are level to the water. And when you actually look at the specifications, the rails are curved exactly the amount of Earth, which is 1 degree every 69 miles. So over a couple of kilometers, there'd be 1.5 degrees of curve, but they are specifically designed to be level with the water. So they just don't understand that the water isn't just doing a thing. They say, water finds its level. Water doesn't do anything. It's just matter that reacts to forces acting on it. And the main force that's acting on everything on Earth is the force created by gravity. And then they say things like, we can see too far. Why can I see that oil rig that's 15 miles away? And you have to explain that the atmosphere causes refraction. It makes light bend. Sometimes you can see further. Sometimes you can't see as far, depending on the refractive conditions. Because when light travels through a medium of varying densities, the path that it travels is curved because it has to applied Fermat's principle, which means that light will travel the path that takes the least time. So they misunderstand all these concepts and then just come to the preconceived conclusion that the Earth is flat. And it is just a misunderstanding of all physics. Gravity absolutely kills the flat Earth. So flat earthers have to deny that gravity exists. And I explained to them, I worked on military submarines when I was in the Royal Navy, and they use gravity to navigate underwater so they don't hit underwater mountains and things. And it just goes in one ear and out the other, mainly because that is the only true empty space inside their heads.
I mean, it's one of those things that, I mean, I understand at least the thinking that you can't trust the government, can't trust any information that's necessarily given to you. But, you know, there's certain people at least that, you know, they've done certain missions, they've gone up into the atmosphere, and they're not necessarily like controlled opposition where, you know, they've taken these videos, you're able to see these things. Like I've even seen multiple cases where these flat earthers will try to conduct some of these experiments and end up disproving themselves within the process of trying to do these experiments. Like one of the best ones is the straight line with the laser with the hole, where they put it at farther distance, then it starts going up a little bit higher. That's one of the best ones I've seen.
You're talking about Jeranism there, from the Flat Earth documentary that was on Netflix, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. Well, he's not a flat earther anymore, and he's actually one of my good friends now. Him and a couple other people went to Antarctica in December 2024 because one of the big flat Earth claims is, well, it's an ice wall around the edge, right? So a 24-hour sun in Antarctica during the summer would be impossible because that would mean it would have to circle just a little bit and nowhere else to get light. So a friend of mine, a multimillionaire called Will Duffy, arranged what he called the final experiment, invited a bunch of globe earthers and flat earthers. I was invited, but I'm disabled, so I didn't want to go and be a burden to others. But they went down there and recorded and saw the 24-hour sun, did other experiments. And then while they were there, Jeranism was like, well, I was wrong. I guess the Earth is actually a globe. Whereas one of the other flat earthers, Austin Whitsitt, came back dumber, which I didn't really get how that could happen. He tried to measure the angle to the sun with his eyes and concluded it was in the wrong place.
Some people are just so invested that you could put the truth right in front of them and they're not going to admit that they're wrong just because they've spent too much time arguing with people about it. It's like you could show them any information and they're still not going to admit to it.
I say that you could strap them to the top of a Soyuz rocket and send them into space, and they say that NASA just CGI'd their eyeballs,
Exactly. Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show. So this kind of lead way a little bit into the other thing that I kind of want to bring up, that a lot of people that get into this whole flat earth concept, it starts with this fascination for there being some weirdness going on with Antarctica. And of course, everybody gets into the whole conspiracy with the Nazis' fascination with it, and the fact that, no country can necessarily claim any specific land or anything like that there. At least like from your research and stuff, and I guess coming from like a scientific perspective, do you think that there is any like weirdness to Antarctica that could have been misinterpreted as this possible phenomenon?
No, it's just a big wasteland. It is the most hostile desert on the planet. It's just a big bit of ice, and that's pretty much it. There's minerals there. There's, it's probably the last place of natural beauty in the world. There's rules that when you go there, you're not allowed to leave trash and stuff, which is why they had to bring the flat earthers home, I guess. But they misquote like Admiral Boyd from a couple of centuries ago, who did an expedition around Antarctica and said that there's lands beyond the South Pole that are greater in size than the United States of America. And they go, oh, that means that there's somewhere else. But he literally just meant the other side of Antarctica because they didn't realize how big it was. The Antarctic Treaty, people always misinterpret what it means, and it's not trying to keep you away from. Anyone can actually go to Antarctica. No one's going to really stop you, but if you get in trouble, they're also probably not going to help you. You can't just get a plane and fly there in the same way you can't just get a plane and fly anywhere you want. You need to give a flight path and stuff. But there's people that circumnavigate Antarctica. There's people that independently walk across the entirety of Antarctica and do it for charity and stuff. Every 3 years, there's the what's it called, the sailboat race. I can't remember what it's called right now, but they travel from France down the coast of Africa and circumnavigate Antarctica and go back up. There's nothing mystical or crazy about it. The Nazi thing was literally, it was just a place that would have been strategically important, and that was about it. And then they try and put these other things in, like these weird conspiracies about Hitler was trying to find a secret hole into the center of the earth or something. And it's just, batshit craziness, frankly.
I mean, the Admiral Byrd thing is one of those ones that everybody kind of uses as an argument. Whether you're a glober or a flat earther, everybody, of course, is fascinated with that story. And, looking into that guy, it seems like a lot of his record shows that he may not have been somebody that would lie about things. So as far as that story goes, do you think that it's just something that somebody kind of misinterpreted across the internet, that they completely made up?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Admiral Byrd's records are there, and nowhere does it, flat earthers will say things like, oh, well, he was traveling for 5, 6, 7 years or whatever. Well, yeah, but that wasn't the entire time. He traveled around most of the world, and some of that time was spent, figuring out what was around Antarctica. There's literally nothing special or hidden about Admiral Byrd. It's just the flat earthers will take certain words and certain concepts completely out of context and say, oh, well, that proves that I'm right. Look, he said there's lands beyond. He said that it was there for 7 years. It wouldn't take you 7 years to go around Antarctica. But that's because they don't actually look into what Admiral Byrd did for the rest of his time.
See, I've often wondered if maybe it was a matter of he flew straight over Antarctica, and once he made it past Antarctica, he started seeing more land and maybe was a little bit misdirection on where he actually was. And maybe there was some kind of clerical error where he wrote this in his journal, and then looking back later on, he realized that it was a landmass he was familiar with or something. But
no, it's literally just misinterpretations of what was said and not being able to follow the whole journey. This is what flat earthers do. They will take a tiny bit of the truth, twist it until it's unrecognizable, and make that the fact. And that is their MO. The way to tell that if a flat earther is lying is their lips are moving.
It's kind of like the landmass concept that, when you actually look at stuff on a map, like the maps that you're taught in school, for example, they're not actually perfectly accurate maps. So that, of course, adds a lot of different speculation in, where a lot of people question, oh, how big is the Earth? What's the actual shape of the Earth? And the ironic part is that if you actually go onto Google Maps, you can actually see the proper context of things. But I believe that it was when I was looking into it, I don't know if this is correct or not, but it looked like, from what I was reading, it looked like when they were making the maps, what they intended to do was that it was Christian-founded nations. They tried to make those countries look like they were the biggest on the planet, so they ended up making South America look a little bit smaller than it was, made Greenland look a little bit bigger than it was. But of course, we're looking at this map saying, oh, we have everything all figured out. But the ironic part is all you have to do is go on Google Earth and realize that just the map context is incorrect. But I think this is one of the things that adds a lot of weird speculation into it.
The thing is, maps are flat and the Earth is not, right? And there is no way to represent a 3D sphere like this on a flat map. So what you have to do is project it and distort it, and you have transformations. For instance, the classic flat Earth map, with the ice wall around the edge and North Pole in the middle. That's called the azimuthal equidistant projection map, centered on the North Pole. And all it does is it stretches out the latitudes at the bottom but maintains the north to south distance, but stretches out the east to west distance to project a 3D sphere into a 2D shape. So it distorts the size of the countries. If you look at the AE map, Australia looks like a massive sausage, but it's not. Australia is that. But on the AE map, it's really long and thin and covers a massive amount. But that's because they had to distort what's on the map to show every country. You can't fit every country unless you put it in a distorted thing. The normal map that you see at school, the square map, is called the Mercator map, and it makes Greenland and North America and Russia and that look way bigger than they are, because it has to again stretch out certain bits. But you'll also find if you look at these maps, they've always got a key on them explaining what the transformation is.
But people don't actually look at the fine print. That's what it comes down to with a lot of this stuff. And also, just to throw this one in there, since we're on we're talking about maps anyways, one of the biggest arguments that I keep seeing from a lot of different flat earthers is the whole UN map. I don't know if you're familiar with that whole, the UN structured map.
Yeah, that is the AE map. That's the thing. And of course, the United Nations, they want to show all the nations, and you can't do that by putting a globe, because it's not going to work. That there's nowhere that you can hold this to show every country at the same time. So, of course, the UN, being the United Nations, supposed to represent everyone, they just use a map that's quite easy to understand, and they chose the AE map. But of course, flat earthers see that as a conspiracy. Oh, they're hiding it in plain sight. Look, why would the United Nations, why would the World Health Organization, why would they use this flat earth map? But it's not a flat earth map. It's just a transformation of a 3D to a 2D plane.
Again, matter of context and understanding that people don't actually take the time to. They see something, then it turns into some giant conspiracy, which is what happened with a lot of this flat earth stuff, man. It was somebody had something and everybody just ran with it, and it turned into something way bigger than it was ever intended to be. Like, philosophically, it's an interesting idea to at least like fathom from a human perspective, which is why, like I said, it's like I'd always be down to have these conversations if you could just have a fun philosophical conversation about it, but it quickly turns into an argument.
Yeah. Here's the thing: is to be a flat earther, you have to believe that everybody's lying to you. Everyone, every pilot, every boat captain, every teacher, every physics professor, everyone that works for a space agency, everyone in government, anyone that builds bridges or tunnels, everyone has to be lying to you. And that is a dangerous mindset to have, that every single person on the planet is lying to you. And when you think that that's the case and that everyone's lying to you, then every other conspiracy is open to you. The moon landing denial, climate change denial, saying that chemtrails are they're covering the skies in clouds that are poisoning us, and of course they're going to say that because they now don't trust anyone. It's not just the government they don't trust; it's absolutely everyone they don't trust, because everybody has to be lying to you.
Well, I guess you kind of brought it up a little bit talking about the moon landing. So I want to get into that one, at least from a flat earther's perspective. Like, what's kind of like your beliefs on the moon landing? The first kind of lay stuff out a bit.
It definitely happened. And you can actually prove that it happened with the videos that they made, and not just by watching them. You can analyze them. The one I really like to talk about is what the astronauts called the Grand Prix. During Apollo 17, the final one, there was quite a big stretch, and they got in the buggy and they went up and down a bunch, right? And you can look at that video, and you can look at the regolith, the moon dust, being spat out the back of the tires, and you can map the trajectory of the particles, right? And this shows two things. No matter how fast or slow you play the video, it shows two things. It shows, one, there was no air, because if there was air, dust would have spread and wobbled and hovered in the air and stuff, but it doesn't. It's just a perfect parabolic trajectory. And two, that it was in a place with lower gravity than Earth, because you can map the physics of how fast and where it's going and calculate what the gravitational acceleration is. So to fake that, right, if say that was done in the studio, they wouldn't have had to only have faked it. They would have had to remove all of the air in the studio and change the gravity in the studio. There's no way it could have been CGI, not in the 1970s like that. It didn't exist. That's when Pong was like the height of CGI technology, So there's no way that was just computer generated. It was an actual video. So the only option if it was fake is it was done in the studio. To do it in the studio, you had to change gravity and you had to remove all of the air.
See, I've always made the suggestion that everybody likes to throw in the whole like Stanley Kubrick argument for this stuff. And I think that regardless, if we win or not, I still think that they were going to end up making some type of a fake footage, because it was the middle of the space race. We couldn't let Russia make it to the moon before us. So, of course, I think the U.S. government had the intention where, if they shot it off or anything like that and this thing got destroyed or blew up, they were still going to have this other footage to make it look like we had won the space race. So a lot of people have this debate on whether or not we actually win or not, but I think that a lot of people just look at the context of there being the possibility of there being fake footage. And I don't, again, put out the possibility of there being fake footage. I think it's just a matter of the context in which you understand why there would be fake footage.
But then you talk about, like, obviously the Soviet Union, the United States' biggest enemy at the time. And they were one of the first people to congratulate America and confirm that it actually happened. They tracked it with their own equipment, So if there was any chance that it was fake, Russia would have been the first ones to be jumping up and down and shouting about it instead of literally congratulating their biggest enemy at the time,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, also just to throw it in here too, considering that you come from a bit of a science background, one of the biggest arguments too with the whole moon stuff is the fact that, we haven't really gone back. They talk about this whole thing that we're not even going to try to go back to the moon. We're going to try to go to Mars. Where do you think this kind of context comes in?
Not understanding how the American government works, basically. After Apollo 17, NASA's budget was slashed. Like during the moon missions, during the Apollo program, NASA got like 8 to 10% of the federal budget, right? Which was a massive amount of money. But after that, they slashed it. Even now, it's like 0.6% of the federal budget. So they didn't go back because the government, they'd done it. They played golf. They'd gone around in buggies. They didn't have anything else to do. So the budget for actually doing that was completely slashed. And the technology was kind of single use. It wasn't like rockets nowadays that are being captured and reused over and over. It was single use, expensive, mechanically powered technology that was, the factories that made the technology were then dismantled and reused for other things. So when people say like, oh, they lost that technology. Well, yeah, the same way that we've lost the technology to make a Ford Model T from scratch. If we wanted to do that, it would be a very painful and stressful process to make a Ford Model T from scratch, because the factories and the equipment to make those don't exist anymore. But then they also ignore everything that's been going on in space, like the International Space Station and all the things around that, and the Chinese space station, and all the thing, the fact that Artemis project is coming up, where they're literally going back to the moon. They just ignore all the advances that have happened, especially since private companies have got involved and pushed the technology forward a lot.
I mean, at least from a scientific standpoint, people always kind of question like, oh, why didn't we colonize the moon? Why didn't we do all this stuff on the moon? I mean, if you're looking at it from like a logistics standpoint, if you're able to develop a space station that you're able to do these, zero gravity experiments or whatever you're trying to conduct, it's going to be a lot more cost effective to go up to that space station that's in orbit than to try to blast somebody 3 days to the moon every single time you got to do a mission back and forth. So I think that's kind of where a lot of this came in, and the confusion comes in is as soon as they shifted over their focus to working on, the space station, like why would they have a reason to try to colonize the moon when they were just trying to make an easier access point? And even from a strategic standpoint, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to make a move from the space station theoretically than it would be to be from 3 days away on the moon.
Yeah. I mean, they have focused on the ISS and the effects of being in space and what benefits could it give us, how it affects the human body and things like that. And we've learned so much from the time that we spent on the ISS and, Skylab before that and the Chinese space station that we know a lot more now. So now setting up a colony on the moon is more probable than it was back then, because we understand the effects of space better and things like that. But it's a lot further away. It's a lot more expensive to get there. You've got to land on another body that's got its own gravitational acceleration. There's a lot more involved in going to the moon than just the ISS. But the Artemis project is extremely exciting, and I'm looking forward to where that goes. I think it's February the 10th now. They're planning to do the launch, and by February the 15th, they will be further away from Earth than any human has ever been, which is incredible. And then Artemis 3 will hopefully be landing on the moon, and then we'll see where we go from there. Because if we want to go to Mars, then the moon would be the best place to have like a base to be able to then go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you have like a stock point too, and even at that point, you'd be able to not necessarily have to land back on a planet that has gravity, which obviously is a lot more expensive than of a process than it is to land on something that doesn't have gravity. So even using it as a supply station, of course, that would be probably the most beneficial way to be able to conduct things.
Yeah, but then of course the conspiracies will go around it. Oh, they haven't been back to the moon. The ISS is just a Satelloon. Every little thing that will give them a bit of, because they already distrust the government and NASA's part of the government. Nothing that NASA says will ever convince them. The flat earthers are already pre-dismissing what's going to happen with Artemis. They're already saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see the CGI and stuff." And they spend all this time like looking at NASA footage and going, "Oh, look at these CGI glitches! Ha ha ha! We've spotted your green screen." And to me, that's one of the dumbest arguments, because if I wasn't a real space agency, but I was still getting several $100 million a day, then I would be producing the most flawless, spectacular CGI that had ever been seen. I mean, they get more than movie studios get to make every movie, and they get that every single day. So if that is all they're doing, faking stuff with CGI, there would be no glitches for anybody to find.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just to throw it in here, since we're actually talking about this too, the whole idea with like the fake footage coming from the space station. I mean, of course, there is some kind of weird stuff, but I mean, if there's like budget slashing, I mean, maybe there's some possibilities that they're just trying to do some, like a publicity stunt, or not publicity stunt, but do some like publicity events and stuff at certain times where they can't necessarily afford to be able to do that. But do you have any thoughts on some of the ideas of like some of the fake footage as far as like just the basic stuff where they're like on the space station?
Well, yeah, I mean, they'll always say, "Oh, look at the harness," and then there's never a harness. There's this one footage of an astronaut where he does a backflip. The person they're talking to, I think they're talking to a TV show or something, and they say, "Oh, do a backflip." So this guy does a backflip, and as he does the backflip, he starts drifting off to the right, and the guy next to him kind of goes to grab and kind of misses, but his finger goes like into a pocket or a belt loop and pulls him back slightly. And the flat earthers and the moonlanders are like, "Oh, look, it's a harness. He grabbed the harness." But, there's no way he could have done that movement and just randomly drifted slightly to the right if he was on a harness. It's stupid. And then there's another clip of where an astronaut is leaving one of the rooms and he fades out of existence, right? And that gets circulated wildly. But that is actually from a NASA video where they've got a bunch of clips of different bits, and it's literally a transition effect between two different scenes. So as you transition, you use the fade out transition, and the next scene, which is still the same room, it looks like the person's disappearing. But when you watch the whole video, it's literally just another scene that they've just transitioned to. Or there's another time where one of the astronauts was doing some magic tricks and made something fall because, he found a pocket of gravity. And to them, that's like, look at the proof. The dude's just performing a trick. He's like, having some fun. He's not going to be up there and then expose that it's not real, It's just a misunderstanding. And mainly it's a want for it to be fake. They don't go into this looking, let me check to see if it's real or not. They go into this thinking, I know it's fake. Let me look for the things that confirm that it's fake.
See, I always question stuff, not from the perspective of like flat Earth, but from the perspective of maybe the universe being a little bit more or a little bit less vast, maybe than we actually realize. Getting into like again the whole like extraterrestrial perspective of things. So at least for some of the footage stuff, that's kind of at least the things that I question is some of the stuff where that's showing like the planet as it's like shifting around, and then sometimes it'll stop for a minute and then it'll come back up. Like maybe there's something that popped up, but not necessarily getting into like the flat Earth stuff, but at least from like some of your research, I guess. Do you kind of get into the possibility of there being covered up footage, at least from the perspective of there being possible like aliens or something weird out in space?
I would love there to be aliens here, right? I'm convinced the universe is vast and amazing. We don't really know how big, but I'm convinced it's vast and amazing. And the building blocks for life exist everywhere that we can see. Everywhere we look, we see the building blocks for life. So I do think there is life out there, but I don't think the technology exists or could exist that would allow intergalactic travel or interstellar travel of any kind. I think if we ever met aliens, it would be drones. It would be AI. Like we're thinking of sending drones to Alpha Centauri, our closest star, 4 light years away, going about 60% the speed of light. It'd take, 10, 15 years to get there. And it would just be little AI drones that go there and then maybe send a signal back to say what's there. And if we ever meet aliens, I think it would just be something similar. I don't think the ability to travel through space as an organic being is something that can exist, which I'm gutted about because, I'm a humongous Star Trek fan.
Say, I got my...
I actually think that the universe is inside nice. I think the universe is a big black hole. It's a newer theory that's come about. And it comes from the idea that a majority of the galaxies rotate in one way. If the universe was truly just like kind of random, then there should be like a 50-50 split as to which ways the galaxies rotate. When you actually look, the majority of them all rotate one way, which doesn't make sense unless you look at the expansion of the universe that we can see back by looking at the cosmic background radiation. And mathematically, it's exactly the same as the formation of a black hole. Now, that says to me that, and to a lot of current scientists that are looking into this idea, that the universe that we exist in is just a black hole, and we are inside a black hole. But mathematically, if you were to fall into a black hole, time behind you would stop, but it would stretch out infinitely in front of you, and so would space because it's such a dense area of gravity. So when you look at how the universe expanded by looking back in time, that is the same as how a black hole forms. So I hold the opinion, and it might not be right, but it's a theory that is spreading, that we live inside a black hole, and that black hole could be inside another universe, that's inside another universe, that's inside another universe. It could be turtles all the way down,
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. Now back to the show.
Is this kind of like the theory that I don't know if it's necessarily on the same lines or not, but that the universe is constantly being like sucked into a black hole because we don't theoretically know what's on the other side. But essentially, this idea is that we basically are just going back and forth between black holes. That like as the universe goes into one, it shifts back and forth into the other. Is that kind of like the concept that you're talking about, where it's basically
almost it? It's the mathematics. Einstein described how a black hole forms mathematically, and when you look back at what we call the Big Bang, it wasn't really a bang; it was just an expansion. When you look back at that, though, by looking at the cosmic background radiation, they are mathematically the same. And what maths says would happen when you go into a black hole matches what we can see as the expansion of the universe. Other people hold maybe the universe is kind of constantly contracting and expanding and contracting and expanding. There's lots of different theories. No one really knows because that is kind of unknowable, right? We can never know what was before the beginning of time. But it's interesting to have these theories and the thoughts, but it's kind of like God. I don't personally believe in God, but at the same time, I know for a fact I could never disprove God because that's outside of science,
I mean, it's outside of even like human comprehension, I think, most of the time,
Yeah.
even just the whole concept of it. Because I mean, you get into some of like the ancient occult stuff, and a lot of it links in with like modern day science, and they still get into this whole concept about there being this like higher working power that's able to basically understand like the function within chaos to be able to bring order to chaos. So, I mean, it's kind of weird. Even within like science philosophy, I think that there's still the possibility of there being like this monotheistic creator. But I mean, if you throw in the whole idea of like us possibly existing within a black hole, I mean, that kind of expands into almost that idea that, we're existing within like a closed system or like a simulated reality, as people believe. And
Well,
then,
that's
of
the thing,
course,
right?
if you're viewing it from that standpoint, you would think that there's something outside, of course, that's the creator of that system. So within that
Yeah.
black hole theory, it almost kind of throws in the philosophy of where you'd get like a monotheistic idea from.
Yeah, like it's simulation theory intrigues me because again, it's something we can't really disprove. But there's no way I can disprove that we're in a simulation. We could all there could be one brain in the universe and we're all just part of its thoughts. We don't know. We can't ever disprove that. But if it is a simulation, or if it is a thought of a giant brain in a jar somewhere, then within that, it exists that the Earth is a globe in a vast universe, So if it is a simulation, that is a simulation of a globe Earth and not a flat Earth.
I mean, theoretically, too, one thing to throw in that I always say when it comes into like the whole simulation theory concept is if you look at like a video game map, of course, the map has to render as more characters develop, as more people join the multiplayer. So, if we are in a simulated reality and a lot of people are looking at this whole flat Earth perspective from a biblical context, something like that, maybe it is possible that, the whole idea of like a rendering reality that we hadn't actually expanded to that point. So from that perspective, everything was flat. Either one, it's a matter of perspective, or if reality is being rendered as we experience it, then, maybe from that standpoint, the Earth wasn't necessarily round yet, but now looking at it from this bigger, broader standpoint, now it's rendered itself to be round. Like it's so weird when you start getting into like the whole simulation theory on how it could line up where some of these ideas and philosophies have changed through time. And it would completely make sense when you're looking at it from the context of a computer system that you'd constantly be updating and patching the map. So if we are in a simulation, why wouldn't our reality be the same way theoretically?
Yeah, like maybe as they went to the moon, they were just like adding that as DLC at the time or something,
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like nothing actually gets rendered until you actually go there and experience it. So, outside of our realm of what we are aware of at this current time, it may not actually be rendered yet, but, some of these places that we potentially have sent like probes to, for example, getting into, I guess, some of the like the weirder, like occult kind of science stuff, about reality functioning as you see and experience it, you get into stuff like the double slit experiment, for example, that as you're watching things, it actually starts to take on a function that's different because it's being observed. You look at some of these
waveform breaking down. Yeah,
exactly. Like some of these other like planets, some of these other places, we may be looking at them on a satellite as like a gaseous body, for example, but maybe it's like a weirder concept that, there is a hard structure to it, but it's because we haven't actually physically been there yet. So it hasn't actually like developed itself yet, as weird as that sounds.
That's the great thing about science is that we don't know the answer to everything. And I don't think we ever could. Right. And, flat earthers and other science deniers, they're like, oh, well, you're supposed to be into science. You're supposed to have all the answers. But no, science has never claimed it has all the answers. Science changes its mind all the time when we get better information. And that's the important thing. Flat earthers and moon landing deniers, people like that, they will never change their mind. No matter what information you throw in their stupid faces, it doesn't matter. They will never change their mind unless they've actually had a reverse lobotomy or something like Jeranism. Whereas a scientist, if they're shown enough evidence that they're incorrect, then they'll change their position because you can't ignore the evidence and you can't just be, headstrong and be like, no, well, I'm right because I said I was and my experiment showed this. If you're shown enough evidence that you're incorrect, of course you have to change your position. That's why the flat earthers, one thing they do is be like, oh, well, science said that the sun was only 20 million miles away. Then it said it was 60 million miles away. Then it said it's 93 million miles away. Well, yeah, that's because over the centuries, our measuring abilities have become better. We don't just use parallax of planets and stuff. We can literally throw radar at the sun and see how long it takes to ping back. And we know the speed of light is 180,000 miles a second. Therefore, it's 8 light minutes away, I'm
still pretty convinced that some of these people, though, they have to just be some form of a psyop. And I hate saying that as like a psyop, like, ooh, it's in the conspiracy community, somebody's being thrown out. But people not necessarily being aware of the fact that they're a psyop, because like I was mentioning earlier, it was during COVID where people were really starting to like get to a point where, you know, they're getting backed up against a wall where everybody was asking the right questions for COVID and everything. So of course, the best way to split that community is to throw something else out there weird that, I mean, even playing into it, I mean, if you don't want people arguing about this conspiracy, you of course have to diverge them to somewhere else. So even within these government agencies, it makes you wonder if they possibly put some weird footage out once in a while just to kind of keep the conversation going so that people stay distracted elsewhere. But
well, flat earthers say that me and other people like me are all paid by NASA and we're all misinformation agents and stuff. And we do screw with that sometimes. Like a few years ago, me and a group of other creators got together and created a fake NASA document about getting paid by NASA as a creator with a pay scale and stuff, depending on how many videos you made about the globe and things like that. And we released it. It got leaked. And all the flat earthers went crazy with, look, this is proof that NASA's paying the globe earthers to lie about flat earth. And, it's the conspiracy minded will believe anything as long as it backs up their narrative.
Dude, that's one of those ones too that it's just like you created it and you could probably show them the proof that it was a created document on your computer. You can delete all the pages, you can fully edit all of it, and people still wouldn't believe it. They'd probably say, nope, you must have made another copy of it and put it back out there just to try to disprove us.
Yeah, it's the thing. And there is a lot of flat earthers that aren't really flat earthers. Like there's a guy called Dave Weiss, deep inside the rabbit hole, who is just a liar. He does not think the earth is flat. He lies about it because it makes him money. He's got an app that he sells for like $7 on the App Store and Apple App Store, whatever, and the few thousand people that have bought it have to pay a subscription, so he gets money from it. So he has to keep lying about the earth being flat. And, you can see the lies that he's telling. I've covered them over and over and pointed out the lies over and over. This is why he'll never talk to me, because he knows that I know every flat earth argument that there is and I can rip him apart. He's done a couple of debates. He did a debate against a guy called Professor Dave, right? Because he thought Professor Dave was an easy mark. He thought, Professor Dave hasn't really covered a lot of flat earth stuff. He's done a couple of videos, but he doesn't really know the arguments. So he thought that he could, have this debate with Professor Dave and destroy him. But Professor Dave's a really smart guy who understands physics. So he just absolutely ripped Dave Weiss apart. And no matter what you do and how many times you disprove him, he will never admit that the earth's a globe, because that's how he makes his money.
Do you think that's what it all simply comes down to, is that everybody wants to say that it's some type of like government conspiracy or something like that, but it's just a matter of, maybe at one point it was just a matter of just whispering it onto the internet, and maybe it was some type of a government psyop, but it didn't extend past the simply just whispering it into the community and making it exist now, and that everybody now who people are questioning as a psyop are just simply lining their own pockets?
I don't think flat earth was ever a government psyop or anything. I think flat earth is a genuine conspiracy theory that COVID really helped push, because everyone was stuck inside on their computers. I started doing flat earth a couple of years before COVID came along, and once COVID came along, it got so much worse because all the village idiots all of a sudden made their own village of extra idiots.
Ironic that comes up when people aren't able to go outside. How weird.
Yeah. And then, of course, COVID was a conspiracy because everything's a conspiracy. And then it was just proof that the earth is flat, because why would they lie to us about COVID? The earth was a globe, and it was all everything is a reason to hide the globe, the flat earth, or to hide God, if you're one of the biblical people, or the biblical flat earthers. That their main kind of argument is, well, you're just told it's a globe to hide God. I mean, if God's really there and all powerful, you ain't gonna be able to hide anything from him, or to hide him from people. That is a ridiculous thing. Why would your God be so puny as to just create a tiny little disc world? If there is a God, then they've created a massive, vast universe full of wonders. They didn't create just a tiny little disc, because that would be a horrible little puny God,
Yeah, exactly. Also, too, at least from my perspective, it seems like the flat Earth community has died down a lot in the past couple of years. At least from your perspective, does it seem like that is the case, or does it seem like it's a matter of these people are just kind of learning to like congregate within themselves and they're not really branching out to the rest of the conspiracy community anymore?
There's a couple of things. They have retreated to their echo chambers because they've been debated to death by me and MC Toon and other people that do the debates. They've been destroyed so often that they will no longer leave their little echo chambers, their little safe spaces where everyone pats each other on the back and says, well done, you said gravity's not real, you destroyed that glober. They won't leave that anymore. But I feel like there also has been a bit of an exodus from flat Earth, especially since Jeranism specifically left flat Earth. And his channel is now mocking flat earthers and stuff. And I think that had a humongous effect on the actual flat earth community. With the advent of space travel, a lot of them have realized that they're stupid. I mean, out of the thousands I've debated, I've had maybe 100, 200 that have emailed me and be like, yeah, you were right, I was wrong. And some even beg me to remove the videos because they want people to see how stupid they were. So it certainly has fallen off. It's not as easy to get a debate with a flat earther these days. They'd have to be really hardcore ones.
I mean, what's their biggest arguments now, considering that a lot of like their biggest arguments have been disproved? Are they still running on these same arguments, or are they kind of like shifting the argument now?
No, there's nothing new. It all comes back. What you find is there's waves, right? You'll have people join Facebook groups and that, and then it's be saying the same things and said over and over. Oh, you can see too far. Water finds its level. Gravity's fake. Ha ha ha. Stupid glober. And then they disappear. But then those memes are around. So then a new group of people find those memes and then flood the Facebook groups. Ha ha. Water's level. Gravity's not real. We can see too far. You're a stupid glober. It is waves of idiots that come and go and then realize that maybe they were stupid and then disappear. But there's never any new arguments. The thing that they're saying at the moment is Earth's measured flat, therefore the Earth is flat. And that's because they don't understand that you can literally get angles to curve things. So they think that because you use straight lines to measure things, therefore the Earth has to be flat. And that's like one of the dumbest things that I could ever, as an engineer, that literally makes my brain sad,
Dude, so considering, of course, that the flat Earth community has pretty much like completely receded at this point, they're not getting into any like new arguments with anybody. They know that at this point, it's like who are they going to convince other than the people that they already have? As far as like your work goes, like what's kind of like shifted over to your like newer focus as the flat Earthers have kind of seemed to subside?
Well, over the past year, I did spend a bunch of time arguing with creationists and stuff like that. But honestly, I've found it extremely toxic. The Christian nationalists and right wing kind of extreme right wingers that will be on that side. I found it really toxic and nasty to deal with. So I've retreated from that section. I don't really want to deal with them anymore. I do argue with evolution deniers and things like that, and moon landing deniers. But honestly, I'm going back to picking up flat Earth because TikTok has kind of taken the flat Earth crown right now. All the flat Earthers that were on YouTube or on Facebook, on X, they've all moved to TikTok. So I've started covering the flat Earthers on TikTok because they're some of the dumbest, and that's where the content is now. I think it's probably never going to die. I think in 100, 300, 400, 500 years time, we'll be living on Mars, right? In these domes on Mars, and there'll be people there going, "You're an idiot. We didn't come here on a spaceship from Earth. Mars is flat." There's always going to be, they're not going to trust you. They're always going to go against the narrative just because they're mistrustful people and are frankly stupid, so they don't understand anything.
I mean, the problem with TikTok is, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, these people are existing within their own echo chambers, and TikTok is essentially created to do that, where it seems like you post whatever crazy thing you want to post, and majority of the time, you're going to get people that agree with that idea. I mean, even some of the crazy stuff that I post, it's like you'll get one bad comment, and like 90 other comments are all people that completely agree with you. So it kind of makes sense that this would be the spot that they would end up backing into, because YouTube, of course, it shows it to anybody that's on either side of the fence. So you're going to get destroyed by the other side on YouTube. But TikTok, again, you're existing within your own sphere. And also, too, you got the newer generation of, I guess, Generation Alpha, Gen Z, that whole generation where they are kind of raised up in this like COVID generation where, they really just don't trust anybody. They don't know what the hell is going on with anything. So it's almost like prime real estate for like a new interest in this to spark, because these people are literally like questioning everything to the point until they actually find their rational stance of like where they believe things actually are. But until then, of course, they're on TikTok, and every single piece of information or conspiracy or whatever that anybody from around the world wants to throw out, they're taking it in, and the algorithms are pushing it in because they know that these people are susceptible to literally anything and everything, and they seek it as curiosity.
It's when it's so easy to post a video and get 1 billion views on TikTok, and everyone's going to see the stupid, and it can be dangerous but good at the same time, but it has given me the opportunity to counter more misinformation, which is what I love doing. I love countering misinformation. And you know what? I'm not infallible. I get shit wrong, and I will admit when I'm wrong, and people sometimes have to convince me that I'm wrong, and then I'll be like, you know what, guys, I have to eat some crow here. I was wrong about that, and explain why I was wrong. But a flat earther will never ever admit that they were wrong or that they've got something wrong. And that's the big difference between people like me and the conspiracy-minded idiots, is that I'm more than willing to gain new knowledge and admit that I was wrong about what I was before, because that's how you advance as a person.
Just out of curiosity, as far as like your arguments go for like the whole flat earth conversation, just to add a little bit of humility to it, some of the stuff that you've been wrong on, do you mind giving like just an example, just for the sake of, showing people that your ideas have changed with more information?
Well, I was having this conversation with Jeranism about navigation, and we were talking about how, obviously there's circles around the Earth, and on the equator, you could kind of just travel east or west and you would never have to turn, and you would get back to where you were. And in my mind, I don't know why I went this way, but I was like, yeah, well, that's true at any latitude. You just keep going and then you wouldn't have to turn. And I was wrong about that, because of course you were. Anywhere else apart from the equator, if you're traveling around, you would have to alter your course to stay going specifically east or west. And in my mind, I'd convinced myself that I was right, that you wouldn't have to turn, and wherever you were on the Earth, you could just keep going around that latitude and get back to where you were. And I was arguing with Jeranism about this over and over, and he was saying, no, you would. And I was like, don't be stupid, you idiot flat earther. Of course you wouldn't. Until I got told by a very good friend of mine who's a PhD, no, Craig, I think you're actually wrong about that. And I had to kind of reassess, go back and actually mathematically look at it. I was like, shit, I got that completely and utterly wrong. And I had to go back to Jeranism, who was a flat earther at the time, but like, you know what, Jeran, you were right about that. And in my mind, I think that actually helped Jeran stop being a flat earther, because he saw that a glober can admit when they're wrong. They're not just pushing a narrative. When they are wrong about something and they know they're wrong, they'll actually come back and admit that they were wrong. And I really feel like that was a bit of a click in his head, amongst the other things, the Antarctica trip and the fact that most flat earthers are about as smart as toe fungus.
Just to add a little bit of verification, that was what was it, the final experiment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had him on the show a very, very long time ago, actually, back when he was a flat earther. And I remember he was doing the tally on the website, and I ended up doing like the one for Globe, of course, because he came on the show talking about it. And and just to add a little bit more context, I remember having a conversation with him a long time ago, and he was like diehard. But again, on the other side of it, he was one of the very few people that I was actually able to have on the show who was a flat earther, who was more than happy to have an educated debate. So I wanted to throw in the perspective that even from him being a flat earther, he was one of the very few that you actually could have a conversation with.
I had maybe 4 debates with him when he was a flat earther, and they were probably the best debates I've had in the way that we could actually have a conversation. Normally it ends up being a shouter match. Honestly, most of my debates I'm known for the dumpster fires, because when you talk to a flat earther, that's generally how it goes. It turns into a complete and utter dumpster fire, right? But with Jeranism, it wasn't. It was a measured, calm conversation with ideas back and forth, no interrupting, no name calling, etc. And that was very different for me. I always thought after those conversations, he's not like other flat earthers. And no, he wasn't like other flat earthers, because he was willing to admit that he was wrong.
And he was willing to actually do the experiment to prove it too.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Most are like, if I actually do the experiment, it's going to prove me wrong. He was willing to do it like live streamed and everything, where if he was wrong, he was going to admit to it. Like he already had the context coming in that he was more than happy to admit when he was wrong. So I feel like just off of that, I think he got caught up in the philosophy of flat earth, because of course, again, it's an interesting thing to fathom, of course, but I don't think he was ever truly a flat earther, just because of the fact that he was willing to actually have a conversation about it.
I think a lot of it was mistrust of government and not understanding the southern part of the world. Antarctica was always his big sticking point. You can't go to Antarctica. That proves that the Earth's flat, right? So when he went there, he kind of had, he told me that even when he was in Punta Arenas waiting to get on the plane, he was still like, it's not going to happen. They're not going to let us go there. Even when they're on the plane, he's like, they're going to make us turn around in a minute, But then when they landed, he's like, shit, I'm in Antarctica. Why would they let me be here if it's not real? So he was convinced that it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to be real. But as soon as it was, he had no choice but to admit that he was wrong, which is great. But the Netflix documentary that you mentioned with the hole and stuff at the beginning, that was really unfair to Jeran, because they totally took everything he said out of context. They lied about the nature of his experiment. They changed the words that he said. They changed the graphics. And it was a hit piece that, although the Earth isn't flat, they were very dishonest in the way that they edited that documentary. And that really helped cement Jeran to be a flat earther at the time. Why would they do this hit piece and make all these lies and edits if the Earth is actually a globe, So it's not just the flat earthers that lie. It's sometimes the people that are arguing against the flat earthers just for good content or whatever will do it wrong. And that Netflix documentary was a shit show of misinformation.
That's one thing that people really need to understand, is that when it comes to the mainstream media, when it comes to conspiracies, when it comes to literally any content that people are interested in seeing, there's always going to be like a money narrative to it, and there's also going to be a matter of spinning the context and the narrative a little bit, because of course a hit piece is always going to hit better than trying to lay down the information correctly, and of course it's always going to make more sense to make something be the complete extreme of whatever the possibility could be, because again, people are going to fall into that camp and make more money off of it. I mean, you see this all the time, even with Sasquatch documentaries, with UFO documentaries. People will lay down this fake stuff just for the sake of content. And people need to consider that, you have to look at the source on where this stuff's coming from. You got to look at the companies that are putting this stuff out. Do you actually trust the people that are actually working on the project, or the bigger company that those people are working for? Because literally almost anything that can be conceived as entertainment, of course, there is a motivation to spin and push the narrative.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, it's going to hit much better if it's a hit piece mocking the flirts, right? But when Jaron and the others signed up for that documentary, they were really told it was more of just a talk with the flat earthers and looking at their perspective. But somewhere during the production, the people doing it changed their mind and were like, nah, you know what? These guys are idiots. We're just going to turn it into a hit piece. And it really wasn't what they agreed to. It wasn't what they signed on for. I know there was like talks of lawsuits and stuff because it was so misrepresented. And I just thought that was not fair. And at the time, that really made Jaron kind of sink even deeper into flat Earth, because of course, why would they lie? Why would they do that? They shouldn't need to do that if the Earth's a globe.
Hey, just more of a reason to be able to actually put some more faith into private creators, because it seems like almost everybody I've talked to that goes on any documentary, everybody doesn't want to get their words spun, and that's what ends up happening. It doesn't matter if it's a flat Earth documentary, an alien documentary. Like I was just talking to Preston Dennett. He's a ufologist, and he was talking about how most of the UFO community has no interest in going on TV shows, going on any of this type of stuff, because all of their opinions get shifted and manipulated. So I feel like the only like true context that you can really get for any of this type of information is podcasts, YouTube channels, all of this type of stuff. And unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the guys that put a lot of their time into producing these films, they need to realize that they're burning all these bridges with a lot of people, and they're going to get to a point where they're not going to be able to produce any content because nobody's going to want to talk with them anymore.
The only flat Earth documentaries that get made now are by flat earthers. You couldn't be a non-flat earther and go to a bunch of people and be like, I want to make a documentary of you, because they're not going to trust you.
Like I said, it doesn't matter what it is. The only way to really do a documentary that's going to do justice is to self-produce it now. So, spend a little bit more time, not giving all this money to Netflix and all these big companies that are going to keep spinning these narratives and causing people to argue over dumb shit, and instead actually listen to the people that are trying to tell the truth on YouTube, like yourself.
Yeah.
Hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in. So I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, man. I always like to end the show with some words of wisdom. So if there's any words of wisdom you'd like to bestow on the listeners today, other than what you've been, of course, telling them the whole show, what might it be?
Don't just believe what you're told, because that's when misinformation spreads. But also don't ignore the evidence, because that's when stupidity spreads.
Yep.
Also, there's two types of people in the world: those that can extrapolate from incomplete data. That's it.
Hey, as I always say, man, you got to do your own research. But on the other side of doing your own research, you have to make sure that you're not looking at it from a biased perspective, because that's one of the hardest things for people to do. Because I get it, people are coming from a religious perspective, they're coming from whatever. And of course, people are going to try to make stuff fit their paradigm, even if they don't realize that they're doing it subconsciously. But if you're trying to really do just for any type of research or any body of research that you have, the best way to do that is to do the research yourself, stand back, present the information to yourself, read between the lines, and come up with a solid conclusion, taking yourself and your opinions out of what the result ends up being.
Yeah, agreed.
So if anybody wanted to come and check out any of your content, follow any of the work that you're doing, or anything that might be going on with you in the future, man, where can people come and find you across the internet, and where can people keep up with you?
The main place you can find me is on YouTube, youtube.com/FTFE1. Just search FTFE or Fight the Flat Earth and you will find me. I do regular 4 or 5 streams a week, release videos whenever I get the chance, debate whenever I can. You'll find me on TikTok, you'll find me on Facebook, you'll find me on X, Instagram, and all the good stuff. Bebo, MySpace, those wonderful things. Are they still a thing? I don't know. So yeah, just search for FTFE and you'll find me and fight the stupidity with me.
Of course, man. Well, I appreciate you making the time to come on today. I'm glad we got around to this conversation. I didn't know which direction it was going to go, but I'm really glad we got to have it because I feel like this is one of those things that's been sitting in the back burner for a while, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that have questioned why I just did a couple Flat Earth episodes talking to people and then just stopped talking about it. So I'm glad that you were able to come on and kind of also clear the air as far as that conversation anyways.
Yeah, I know we were planning to do it before. I've had some deaths in the family and stuff, and I had to kind of take some time to deal with myself and things, so things get pushed back. So I am sorry about that. I'm glad we got to do it.
Oh, no worries at all, man. I always say, a show is a show, but family always comes first. So, I'm never going to be mad at a man for taking care of family first. So,
well, thanks for having me on. It's been a great conversation. I do appreciate it.
Big thank you to everyone out there for catching this week's episodes. Just a reminder, this show wouldn't be possible without listeners like you. Podcasts are a labor of love, and I want to be able to keep this show going for as long as possible. If you might be interested in supporting the show and all of the hard work behind it, some of the best ways that you guys can do that is by leaving a review or rating for the show anywhere that you guys happen to listen to the show. And once I find it, I will read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. You guys can also share the show through word of mouth with anybody that you think might happen to enjoy the show. Because honestly, podcasts, the only way that these things grow is through grassroots from listeners like you guys, because a lot of the time you don't really listen to a new podcast unless you have a friend or somebody close to you that ends up suggesting it to you. So anything you guys can do, I would definitely appreciate. And if you're in a position to support the show and you find value in what I do, please consider donating to the show directly. That is definitely one of the best ways to make sure that the show will keep afloat. Any value that you guys find in the show, you guys could donate back through PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, and of course, all of those links are available down in the show description. And you guys can also go and check out the Patreon now with just one tier, full access for $2.50 a month. And if you guys are interested in checking it out, there is a 7-day free trial. And if you guys enjoy it, it'd be awesome if you guys wouldn't mind sticking around for a while. And last but not least, you guys can also go and check out the Bizarre Reality merch store with t-shirts just $15.68 plus shipping, which equals out to about $20, so about average for a t-shirt, and you guys can support the little guy in the process. And if you guys might be interested in keeping up with the show, you guys could go and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook, and you guys could also catch live shows and video content on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube, TikTok, and Rumble channels. And if you guys might need another podcast to get you through your work week, please consider going and checking out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin, diving into a lot of the same topics we talk about on this show, but in a different format because it's usually our research and not so much the interview style. But we do have some of those mixed in, of course, in the process. And if you guys missed any of that, every single thing that I mentioned is available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey. With a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and